The Trump administration made a big claim that Harvard, you no longer are going to get your federal funding because you have not done what we've said you're supposed to. And that was to the tune, let's hear this dollar figure, to the tune of $2 billion.
They were originally looking up to $9 billion in freezing. That is still under review. We'll see what happens there. But this comes after the Department of Education on April 11th sent a letter outlining governance and leadership reforms, merit-based hiring reform, merit-based admissions reform, international admission reform, and viewpoint diversity in admissions and hiring, as well as reforming programs with egregious records of anti-Semitism or other bias. Well, Harvard late yesterday, announced that they will not be complying with these
They will not bow down
reforms
to the federal government that was giving them $2.2 billion.
Here's what the current president, Alan Garber, said. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. This is the university that is taking billions of dollars from the federal government and is saying, you can't tell us what to do with that money. There's also a quote from the Department of Education and the General Services Administration, who put out this statement detailing the freeze of the $2.2 billion in the grants. And it says, Harvard's statement today reinforces the troubling entitlement mindset that is endemic in our nation's most prestigious universities and colleges. That federal investment does not come with the responsibility to uphold civil rights laws. The federal government is saying, if we're giving you all this money, you have to uphold civil rights laws. You have to protect the members of your academic community that are being targeted by pro-Hamas terrorists. We saw how bad it got. And they're trying to say, we're doing things, but we're going to do it our way. We're not going to be beholden to the government making sure that we are following and upholding the civil rights of Jewish students on our campus. That is a serious problem.
Qatar has sent over $4 billion to many of our elite universities. And here's the hypocrisy of their statement of moral certitude. Imagine that a student came from Norway and started a group at Harvard calling for the death of all Muslims and raising these big encampments with wearing masks, talking about how Muslims should not exist and not allowing Muslims to walk across campus and assaulting Muslims on campus. Do you think Harvard would be standing there, preening about free speech? We can do whatever we want. So it's a complete joke. I don't see how anybody could send their kids to any of these schools. And you're actually seeing that. You saw Columbia. Nobody wants to send your kids there. Who would want to? So, yeah, it's again, I keep wanting to not write a song about these elite universities because I've written too many songs, but I just may have to because they're such a joke and a disgrace to our country. So, yeah, it's again, they continue to shame themselves. And hey, but luckily, we finally have an administration that holds them accountable. Fine. If you don't want to take any public funding, why are we sending them money anyways?
The Trump administration has gone in and said, let's try to help. Let's try to make this better. Of course, we're finding out more and more information about what your tax dollars are going to. We've been talking about that for decades, that your tax dollars are going to things that you maybe don't approve of. Of course, we all knew there's federal funding of universities. Look, I worked for a university last year. I know there's funding that comes from that. I'm not, just saying no one should be receiving any federal funding if you're in the education system. But do I think that Harvard, one of the biggest, with a $200,000 plus, that's just the base to go there for 4 years, needs with billions and tens of billions of dollars in endowment, do they need $2 billion from our taxpayer funding? You got to remember how much a billion is.
Right.
To then get to your head to $2.2 billion. It's an unfathomable amount of money that we are just handing over to Harvard and saying, good luck, have fun. And we've been doing that probably for years.
$2.2 billion going to Harvard, and Harvard's trying to argue, hey, federal government, you have to give us money, but you can't say there's any strings attached. There's a reason why universities like Hillsdale, and there's not many of them in this country, but they don't take any federal dollars. Why? Because they said, we don't want the federal government to have a say in what we teach here. Yeah. They admit that. They know that if we take federal money,
that's part of the deal.
Then they are going to be able to shape the education at our university. Harvard now is trying to say, how dare you give us billions of dollars and then try to speak into how we protect Jewish students on campus after what we've seen for over a year and a half at this point, after the October 7th massacres, the attempted genocide in Israel, and the way that people on those campuses responded. They're trying to say, you can't tell us how to run our own university, but you have to give us this money.
It's nice to see things beginning to happen under this administration to those who have really been calling openly for the genocide of the Jews, including many at Harvard University being sanctioned, being coddled by faculty and certainly students. And so this is a moral thing to do. This is not just, by the way, threatening America's students. Anybody who would send their child to a school like Harvard, an institution like Harvard, would understand that this level of evil exists and is being promoted by the school and protected by the school. Indeed, it seems to be so precious to the school that they're willing to forego a couple of $1 billion. And now the latest news is that the president is threatening their tax-exempt status. Well, good. That needs to happen.
Harvard has a $53.2 billion endowment. So that is their investment fund, their cash reserves. It's enormous. And a lot of times universities, they use that money. They take the interest and they're able to use that for funding in ways but it's a non-taxed pile of money because of their tax exempt status.
It's tax day. So.
And here's the problem. America writ large, whether it be our government, our institutions, aren't living within their means. They expect the American people to, but they're not. They're saying, and this is what is so ironic to me, is that why their endowment can't save them is because of many of the donations that are given to the endowment are for specific things and have strings attached, like naming rights, certain scholarship funds, certain buildings to be built. So the money they have has strings attached from private donors. But they're trying to say that the money that the federal government gives you can't have strings attached about how to protect the American citizens that are going to this university and that are being targeted because they're Jewish. That is so outlandish. They don't see the irony here.